Hard times come again no more. That's a declaration. That's not wishful thinking. Let's make that a declaration. So this morning I want to talk about sacred vulnerability. And those two things don't necessarily go in the same sentence if we understand vulnerability and the sacred. Because on the spiritual side, we are always whole, perfect, and complete. There is nothing that has ever harmed us. There is nothing that can harm us. Because there's only one thing happening here, and that is the infinite expressing in multiplicity, and it is never against itself. Now, on the human level, we're not there. On the human level, we very much experience this sense of vulnerability, this sense that we can be threatened, that there is something available in our experience that can hurt us. And on the physical plane, that is absolutely accurate. It's absolutely accurate. And one of the things, if for those that are in this community and know me, and those beyond here that have experienced me, I'm a both and guy. There is no part of me that is going to entertain spiritual bypass at the expense of the human experience. Because I'm pretty sure that if we were meant to be in some other experience other than human, then we'd be in that. And that for me to truly honor the desire of Creator's heart as my life is to embrace my humanness from a spiritual perspective, as a spiritual experience, as the divine's desire of its own heart to expand its experience of itself as my life. And so perhaps we can begin to understand this sense of vulnerability as a spiritual communication that we're operating in separation, or that we're just simply having a delightful, amazing, full human experience. That it can actually be both. That we can simultaneously know that the infinite within us cannot be harmed, and at the same time recognize that we're traveling in a finite container, a finite human vehicle, and has a very different experience sometimes. It's interesting to me, more than a little interesting, that we are moving into the time of Passover. And one of the things that happened in the exile and liberation of the Hebrew from the Egyptian enslavement was a time where they had to shelter in place. A time where there were plagues that they had to shelter in place to avoid being able to move into the next step of their liberation. And that even in the process of their liberation, there were times of discontent. There were times of sacred vulnerability, traveling through the wilderness, staying in the wilderness for 40 years to the idea of the story, as I understand it, was for everything in that generation that was misguided and living in separation and living in mistaken beliefs to literally die off. So that a new consciousness, a new awareness was taken into the promised land. The problem with that is that there's only one mind. And the other difficulty becomes the generation that is dying off is still teaching the next generation. And so those beliefs get carried forward. And those beliefs get carried forward. And sometimes we find ourselves with a belief that we have no idea where it came from. And under times of stress on this human plane, those old, ancient human beliefs tend to be our brain's default. Watching people revert to beliefs that I know when they are not under stress is not how they operate in the world. And I'm watching people be surprised at their own regression into thought territory that doesn't represent them. And so I want to give us some tools today. First of all, grieve. When the tears come, let them come. Embrace this human thing that's happening. Because this idea that someday when this ends, we're going back to normal, there's nowhere to go back to. There's nowhere to go back to. And spiritual growth, Reverend Dr. Michael Beckwith says that 100% of spiritual growth is in letting go. And I believe that. Because, and we've talked about it in terms of, the pivot foot that we keep anchored in what we know. And it keeps us, we can stretch a little, but we keep coming back. And we stretch a little, and we keep coming back. The first step is easy. It's the second step. It's the one where we release our hold on what has been. When we let go and step into a new expression. Evolution is always forward, folks. Always forward. And will we use this time of sacred vulnerability to step into a new expression of ourselves that, much like the liberation of Passover, challenged the social structures of the time, opened pathways for new ways of being in the world, set captives free, changed the economic structure. Are we not living in exactly that right now? Everything we thought we understood, not there anymore. And will we? Started to say, can we? And I know we can. That's not the question. The question is, will we lean into the newness that, by the way, we created? See, there are no neutral thoughts. And so many of us have held in consciousness the need for social change. So many of us have held in consciousness the need for economic equity. Perhaps that is exactly what's happening. Perhaps things are shifting to a new birth. A birth of something that, how many times have we sung the song Imagine? Imagine there are no countries. There are no borders. There is no separation. And I think we have been imagining it. And I think we're being offered an experience of that. By something that we see the effects of. And unless you happen to have your own electron microscope, we don't see it. And it creates a level of uncertainty that we're uncomfortable with. And will we lean into everything we need to know to navigate this experience we already know? Because the first step to accessing it is believing that you know it. Believing that it's available to you to access. Because it is. The infinite intelligence of the universe is your intelligence. It already is that. There's nothing for you to wait for, and everything for you to simply open up to a revelation of it. To know what you already know. I watched the 1956 Ten Commandments last night. I've watched it so many times, I know what's coming. But this time was different because as they were reading the Ten Commandments, I was struck by how much of it is in the negative of what not to do. And so I thought our greatest tool might be to turn these into what to do. And so I offer you these 10 things to do. Don't put anything before the God of your understanding. Make the God of your understanding primary in your life. They say, thou shalt not have strange gods before me. So we can flip that to, in the infinity of creation, there is no strangeness. And I prioritize my understanding and my experience of divinity as uniquely, preciously my own. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. And perhaps we can flip that one to, I speak with authority. I refuse to let my human brain use past experience to lie to me about what God is and the power that lives within me. Remember to keep the Sabbath day holy. Establish a day that is is yours with the divine. Mine is on Mondays. And for the most part, I've done really, really well in ministry, keeping that day with me and the divine. If it's Sunday, great. Then immerse yourself in spiritual practice, spiritual focus, spiritual experience in that I-thou relationship where you get filled up by what created you. Work on that relationship, build that relationship, celebrate that relationship at least one day a week. I have to laugh because sometimes I have to leave home in order to have that. And it was like, but I'm the only one here. And I'm like, and you're a people. I gotta go. Give yourself that gift with just you and your Creator. Honor your father and your mother. Perhaps we can look at that as honor the wholeness of yourself. Honor the masculine and feminine within you and everything on the spectrum. Thou shalt not kill. That one's easy. Thou shalt live ferociously. Thou shalt focus thy life on living. Ernest Holmes says somewhere around page 270 that what is important is that while we live, we live. So how about we flip that commandment to that? Thou shalt not commit adultery. Be in integrity. Be faithful to the commitments that you make. Honor your agreements. Thou shalt not steal. And I would invite you to flip that into be responsible for what's yours. Cherish, uplift, and celebrate everyone's accomplishments. Everyone's accomplishments. Tell the truth. Because we can steal the truth. This is not just about possessions. So tell the truth. Be in integrity. Do what you say what you do, and then follow through. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Quit making up stuff. And then quit saying it out loud. So instead, what do? We tell ourselves the truth. We take ownership of the narrative that we write in our heads about other people. We truth check it, and then we bring our own consciousness into alignment. That's what we do. Instead of not telling lies, tell the truth. And that begins with owning that we all have PhDs in MSU, making stuff up. So instead, examine it, tell the truth, live there. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's anything. And this is where we get to celebrate everyone's abundance. Celebrate everyone's manifestation. Instead of separating ourselves, we get to understand that their manifestation is my manifestation, and so there's nothing for me to covet. There's nothing for me to want because we're all one. And what one achieves, we all achieve. And so that one's easy. Celebrate everyone's accomplishments. Celebrate one another's relationships. Celebrate life. just exactly as it is. Lean into the reality that you are beloved, whole, perfect, and complete. That the essence of you, the spiritual you, has never been hurt and cannot be. And live from there. I invite you to challenge yourself to understand the human experience from your spiritual center, rather than trying to understand your spiritual center from your human perspective. Let's take this into prayer. And so what I know is that there still always was, always will be, one infinite, ever-present allness. That it is that thing that has no boundary. It is everywhere present, in, through, and as its creation. It is the unseen, it is the seen. It is the imagined, it is the unimagined. It is everything that has ever been, it is what is now, and it is what we are evolving into. I am that. All life is that. And so when I speak my word, claiming a revelation of the truth of our being, I am claiming that for all of life. Everything, from the smallest to what we perceive as the greatest, knowing that in the mind of the infinite there is no big, there is no little, there is no greater than, less than, more than, less than. There's just creation. So I speak my word, claiming and affirming that we step fully, embracing this time of evolution into a palpable experience of the equity that has always existed at every level, at every expression. That truth revealed is healing. That the only thing that is ever required to heal is a revealing of more truth. So we lean into that. We lean into and through and embrace this idea of sacred vulnerability as a yes and. This sacred vulnerability feels the feelings and moves out of the comfort zone into our next greatest expression of wow. And as I feel the words of truth resonate within my being, recognizing itself, I move to gratitude. And so I simply release from this place of gratitude, from this place of faith that feels into itself, that knows that it knows from that I am knowingness, that it's done. And I invite you right where you are to say aloud with me, to claim this as your own as we speak together. Amen. Ashe. Aho. And so it is.